Russia and Prussia. Their names sound almost identical, but did you know that they have absolutely nothing to do with each other? One was a German-speaking military powerhouse. The other one was a massive Slavic empire. So why do their names sound so similar? Well, they actually don't. At least not in other languages. This becomes pretty clear if we use another language. Like for example, Swedish. In Swedish, Prussia becomes Preussen, and Russia becomes Ryssland. Now they don't sound similar at all. This becomes even more apparent in their native languages, as the difference is even bigger, with Russians calling their homeland Russia, while Germans still call Prussia Preussen, only swapping out the usual double S for the unique letter instead, because of course Germans even have to make their spelling more efficient. So why do they sound so alike in English then? Well, it all comes down to history, and a bit of linguistic laziness. Let's start with Prussia. The name actually comes from the Old Prussians, a Baltic people who lived in what's now northern Poland, Kaliningrad, and parts of Lithuania. The Old Prussians were actually one of the last people in Europe to become Christian, holding out for a long time. But in the 13th century, the Teutonic Order, which were a group of German knights who was originally founded during the Crusades into the Holy Land, finally conquered the region and started to colonize and Christianize the people. As the Teutonic Order took control, they started calling the land Preussen, taking a name from the local Baltic people. However, it's important to note that this was not the actual name. This was the Germanized version of the original word. But what was the original Baltic word then? Well, I'm so sorry to say this, but we have actually no idea. The Old Prussians didn't have a written language, so it's lost to history what they actually called it. However, based on linguistic evidence, historians have proposed several possible names. But despite its mysterious origins, the name started to spread as the Teutonic Order expanded and traded with other parts of Europe. And as the name eventually made its way to the British Isles, you might think that English, being a Germanic language, like German, would just adopt the word Preussen, like the other Germanic languages. But funnily enough, no. Instead, England decided to be the odd one out and went with the Latin translation instead, calling it Prussia. This happened because of the strong Latin influence on English, thanks to centuries of Norman rule and Latin's role in education. Now, Russia's name has a completely different origin. It comes down from the Rus, the name of the early Slavic state, which depending on who you ask, was founded by Viking rulers from Sweden in the 9th century. Okay, but where does the word Rus come from then? Well, that's heavily debated, as all linguistic things are. The most common theory is that it comes from the Old Norse word rodr, meaning rowing, since the Vikings relied on rowing their ships to travel up the rivers into Russia. Other theories suggest Rus comes from Slavic or even Iranian origins. But anyways, over time, Rus evolved into Russia in Russian, and much like with Prussia, English speakers tweaked the name, turning Russia into Russia. So, this means that the only reason it sounds similar in English is because England took two completely unrelated names and smoothed them out until they accidentally became twins. This wasn't a problem at the time, since neither Prussia nor Russia knew how similar the names sounded in English. But today, history students often get confused and mix them up, even though they had nothing in common, with the exception of occasionally invading Poland.